You know what nobody wants to tell you? The truth about getting rich after 40. And I'm going to tell you that truth right now because you need to hear it. Not the sugar-coated version, not the motivational garbage that makes you feel good but doesn't actually help you. The real truth, the hard truth, the truth that might make you uncomfortable but could save your financial future. I'm Kevin O'Leary. I've been in the business world for decades. I've made fortunes. I've lost money. I've sat across from thousands of entrepreneurs on Shark Tank. I've seen every financial mistake a human being can make. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that getting rich after 40 is different. It's not the same game you would have played in your 20s. The rules have changed, the timeline has tightened, and the consequences of your mistakes are now catastrophic. But here's what nobody else will tell you. It's not too late, not even close. If you're 40, you've probably got another 40 years ahead of you. If you're 45, you've got 35 years. Even if you're 50, you've got 30 years of compounding available to you. That's enough time to build serious wealth, real wealth, the kind of wealth that gives you freedom. But only if you stop making the mistakes that got you to this point without money. And that's the key. Most people who reach 40 without wealth didn't get there by accident. They got there by making specific mistakes over and over again. And if they don't stop making those mistakes right now, they'll reach 60 and 70 with even less. Because at 40, you don't have time to recover anymore. When you're 25 and you blow $10,000 on something stupid, you've got 40 years to make it back. When you're 45 and you blow $10,000, you've got 20 years. The margin for error has disappeared. So let me start with the biggest truth that nobody wants to accept. If you're 40, and you're not wealthy yet, it's because you've been doing something wrong. And I don't mean that to be harsh, I mean it to be honest. You've been making decisions that destroyed wealth instead of building it, and those decisions probably felt normal at the time. Everyone around you was making them. Society told you they were fine, but they weren't fine. They were killing your financial future slowly. The good news, you can stop, you can change direction right now, today, this moment. But you have to be willing to admit that what you've been doing hasn't worked. You have to be willing to do something different. And you have to understand exactly what you need to stop doing and what you need to start doing instead. Let me tell you what changes after 40 that makes wealth building different. First, time. You don't have as much of it. Compounding works through time. The longer your money has to grow, the more wealth you build. If you start investing at 25, your money has 40 years to compound before you're 65. If you start at 45, your money has 20 years. That's half the time. And because of how compounding works, half the time doesn't mean half the wealth. It means way less than half. Here's an example. Let's say you invest $1,000 a month starting at age 25. You do this for 40 years until you're 65. At 10% annual returns, which is about what the stock market has historically returned, you'll have about $6.3 million. But if you start that same $1,000 a month at age 45 and invest for 20 years, you'll have about $760,000. Same monthly investment, half the time, but instead of half the money, you have about 12% of the money. That's the brutal math of starting late. The first 20 years of investing create the majority of your wealth because compounding accelerates over time. The money you invest early has more time to double and double again. The money you invest later doesn't. So when you start at 40, you're missing out on the most powerful years of compounding. But here's where most people get this completely wrong. They look at those numbers and they give up. They say, well, I'm 40 and I haven't started yet, so what's the point? I'll never catch up. And that's the worst possible conclusion. Because $760,000 is life-changing money. It's the difference between working until you die and retiring comfortably. It's the difference between financial stress and financial peace. It's still wealth, real wealth. Just because it's not $6 million doesn't mean it's not worth building. The second thing that changes after 40 is risk tolerance. When you're 25 and you lose money in the market, You've got decades to make it back. When you're 55 and you lose money, you don't. So the risks you can afford to take get smaller. And this is where people make catastrophic mistakes. They reach 40, they realize they're behind, and they start taking stupid risks to try to catch up. They invest in some speculative stock that someone told them about. They buy cryptocurrency, hoping it'll make them rich overnight. They start a business they have no experience running. They borrow money to invest. They do all kinds of desperate things because they're panicking about time. And these desperate moves almost always destroy what little wealth they've managed to build. I see this on Shark Tank constantly. People in their 40s and 50s who've sunk their life savings into a business idea that makes no sense. And when I ask them why, they always say the same thing. Because I'm running out of time. I need to build wealth fast. And I tell them, you're not building wealth, you're gambling. And gambling is how you guarantee you'll stay broke. After 40, you cannot afford big losses. 25-year-old who loses 50% of their portfolio has plenty of time to recover. A 50-year-old who loses 50% might never recover. Because recovery isn't just about making back the percentage you lost. It's about the time you lose while recovering. If you lose 50%, you need to make 100% returns just to get back to where you were. And how long does that take? Years, maybe a decade, time you don't have. So the strategy after 40 has to be different. It has to be more conservative, more focused on not losing money than on making huge gains. And this frustrates people because they want the excitement, they want the big wins, but big wins come with big risks. And big risks after 40 can destroy you. Now let me tell you what actually works, what actually builds wealth after 40. And it's not complicated, it's not exciting, it's not going to make you feel like a genius, but it works. And working is all that matters. First, you need to stop hemorrhaging money. Most people who reach 40% without wealth are spending everything they make. Or worse, they're spending more than they make and carrying debt. Credit card debt, car loans, maybe even a mortgage that's too big for their income. And all of that debt is like a hole in your bucket. You can pour money in, but it's leaking out the bottom faster than you can fill it. I've said this 1,000 times. You need to be debt-free by 45, not by 65, by 45. Because debt payments are money that could be compounding for you. Every dollar you pay in interest is a dollar that can't grow. And after 40, you can't afford to waste dollars on interest. Credit card debt at 22% interest is financial suicide at any age, but especially after 40. So step one, kill the debt, all of it, as fast as humanly possible. Cut your spending, work extra hours, sell stuff you don't need, whatever it takes. Get rid of the debt. Because until you do, you cannot build wealth. You're just treading water. Second, you need to start saving aggressively. And I mean aggressively. Not 5% of your income, not even 10%. You need to be saving at least 20 to 25% of your gross income if you're starting at 40. I know that sounds impossible. People tell me all the time, Kevin, I can't save 25%. I'm barely making ends meet. And I say, then you're spending too much, period. Because here's the truth. Most of the stuff you're spending money on, you don't need. The new car every few years, the house that's too big, the expensive vacations, the restaurants and coffee shops and subscriptions, none of that is building wealth. All of that is destroying it. And if you want to get rich after 40, you have to be willing to live differently than everyone around you. You have to be willing to drive a 10-year-old car while your neighbors buy new ones. You have to be willing to live in a modest house while your friends stretch for bigger ones. You have to be willing to cook at home while everyone else eats out. You have to be different. Because being normal after 40 without wealth means staying broke forever. Cut your spending by 25%. I don't care what you have to cut. Figure it out. Track every dollar you spend for 90 days. Look at your bank statements. You'll find the money. It's there. You're just spending it on things that don't matter. And once you cut that spending, invest every dollar you save. not into some complicated strategy, into simple index funds that track the stock market. Let me give you the math on this because the math is what matters. Let's say you're 45 years old. You make $75,000 a year. You cut your spending by 25%, which frees up about $1,500 a month. You invest that $1,500 every single month into an S&P 500 index fund. You do this for 20 years until you're 65. At 10% annual returns, which is about what the market has historically done, you'll have about $1.1 million when you retire. Over $1 million. From starting at 45 with nothing. Is it 10 million? No. But it's enough to retire on comfortably using the 4% rule. You can withdraw $40,000 a year without running out of money. Combined with Social Security, you're looking at a decent retirement. But here's what most people miss. That only works if you're consistent. If you invest that $1,500 every single month for 20 years without stopping, without panicking when the market drops, without pulling money out for emergencies or splurges or whatever, you have to be disciplined, boring, consistent, month after month, year after year. And that's where most people fail. Not because they don't understand the math, but because they can't control their emotions. They see the market drop 20% and they panic. They pull their money out. They wait for things to calm down. And by the time they get back in, the market has recovered and they've locked in their losses. This emotional behavior destroys more wealth than anything else. After 40, you have to develop ice in your veins. You have to be able to watch your portfolio drop 30, 40, even 50% and do nothing. Not panic, not sell, nothing, because the market always recovers. It always has. And when you're investing monthly, you're actually benefiting from the drops because you're buying more shares when prices are low. But you have to have the discipline to keep investing when it feels scary. Here's something else people get wrong after 40. They think they need to get fancy with their investments. They start looking at individual stocks, options, day trading, real estate flipping, cryptocurrency, all kinds of complicated things. And I'm telling you, don't. Just don't. The more complicated your strategy, the more ways it can fail. And you don't have time for failure. Buy index funds. That's it. Specifically buy S&P 500 index funds that give you exposure to the 500 largest companies in America. Over long periods, this has returned about 10% annually. Some years more, some years less, but the average is about 10%. And that's enough. You don't need to beat the market. You just need to match it consistently for decades. I know this sounds boring. It is boring, but boring works. Exciting strategies usually end in disaster, especially for people who don't have extensive investment experience. And if you had extensive investment experience, you probably wouldn't be starting at 40% with no wealth. So stick to what's simple and proven. Now let me talk about something that kills people after 40%. Borrowing money to invest, leverage, margin, whatever you want to call it. Some people reach 40, realize they're behind and think, if I borrow money to invest, I can accelerate my wealth building. And that's technically true, if everything goes right. But when things go wrong, and they will eventually go wrong, leverage destroys you. Here's why. Let's say you have $50,000 saved. You borrow another $50,000 on margin to invest. Now you've got $100,000 in the market. If the market goes up 20%, you make $20,000 instead of $10,000. You've doubled your gains. But if the market goes down 20%, you lose $20,000. And you still owe the $50,000 you borrowed plus interest. You've lost 40% of your actual money plus you're in debt, and it gets worse. If the market drops enough, you'll get a margin call. The broker will force you to sell at the worst possible time to pay back the loan. You'll lock in devastating losses, and you'll be broke. This exact scenario has destroyed countless people over 40 who thought they could borrow their way to wealth. Never borrow money to invest. Ever. I don't care how good the opportunity looks. I don't care how confident you are. The risk after 40 is too high. You invest with money you have, not money you don't have, period. Here's another mistake people make after 40. They refuse to learn anything new. They say, I'm too old to understand investing. I'm too old to learn about finance. I'll just let someone else handle it. And then they hand their money to some financial advisor who charges them 2% annually and puts them in mediocre investments. Over 20 years, those fees will cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're never too old to learn. I don't care if you're 40, 50, 60, or 70. You can learn the basics of investing. You can understand what an index fund is. You can figure out how to open a brokerage account and set up automatic investments. It's not rocket science. And learning these basic skills will save you massive amounts of money in fees and bad advice. The people who get rich after 40 are the ones who take responsibility for their own financial education. They read books, they watch videos, they learn how compound interest works, they understand the difference between stocks and bonds, they educate themselves. Because once you understand the basics, you realize it's not complicated. And you stop being at the mercy of people trying to sell you expensive financial products you don't need. Let me tell you about timing, because this is critical after 40. You still have decades. But those decades go by fast. If you're 45 right now and you wait 5 years to start getting serious about wealth building, you'll be 50. And now, instead of 20 years to compound, you have 15. And 5 years makes an enormous difference. Every year you delay starting costs you tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost compounding. So you cannot afford to wait. Not for the perfect time. Not until you get a raise. Not until the market looks better. Not until you feel more confident. You start now, today, this week, with whatever money you can scrape together. Even if it's just $200 a month, you start, because small amounts invested consistently over long periods build real wealth. $200 a month for 25 years at 10% returns becomes about $260,000. Is that rich? No. But it's $250,000 you wouldn't have had otherwise. And that could be the difference between a decent retirement and poverty. Here's something else. After 40, you need to protect what you're building. Insurance becomes crucial. Health insurance, life insurance if you have dependents, disability insurance if you're still working. One catastrophic health event without insurance can wipe out everything you've saved. I've seen it happen. Medical bankruptcy is one of the leading causes of financial ruin in America. You also need an emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of living expenses in cash, in a high-yield savings account, not invested, not in stocks, in cash, because emergencies will happen. Your car will break down. Your roof will leak. You'll need dental work. And if you don't have cash to cover these things, you'll go into debt, or you'll have to sell your investments at the worst possible time. After 40, financial planning isn't just about building wealth. It's about protecting wealth. You need both. You need to be growing your assets while simultaneously making sure you don't lose them to preventable disasters. Now let me address something that's uncomfortable but necessary: relationships and money. If you're married or in a serious relationship, you and your partner need to be on the same page financially. I've seen countless people trying to build wealth after 40 while their spouse is spending everything. It doesn't work. You can't save 25% of your income while your partner is buying new cars and going on expensive vacations. You need to have the hard conversation. You need to agree on financial goals. You need to create a budget together. And if your partner won't get on board, you have a serious problem, because building wealth requires cooperation. One person can't do it alone while the other person undermines it. And if you're single, you need to be even more careful. You don't have a second income to fall back on. You don't have someone else contributing to retirement savings. It's all on you, which means your discipline has to be even stronger. Your savings rate needs to be even higher. You can't afford any financial mistakes because there's no safety net. Here's the thing about getting rich after 40 that most people don't understand. It's not about making brilliant investment decisions. It's not about finding the next Apple or Amazon. It's not about timing the market perfectly. It's about avoiding stupidity. It's about not doing dumb things with your money. It's about being boringly consistent for decades. The people who get rich after 40 are the ones who stop buying new cars, stop buying houses they can't afford, stop carrying credit card debt, stop trying to impress people with luxury purchases, stop taking expensive vacations they finance, stop gambling on speculative investments. They stop doing all the stupid things that keep people broke, and they start doing the boring things that build wealth. You save a significant percentage of your income. You invest it in index funds. You leave it alone for decades. You don't panic when the market drops. You don't get greedy when the market soars. You just keep investing consistently month after month, year after year, until you retire. That's it. That's the entire strategy. Simple doesn't mean easy, because doing this requires you to be different from everyone around you. It requires you to delay gratification. It requires you to think long-term in a world that only thinks about right now. It requires discipline when everyone else is being impulsive. And that's hard. It's really hard. But here's what makes it worth it. Freedom, real freedom. The freedom to retire when you want to instead of when your body gives out. The freedom to not worry about money in your 70s and 80s. The freedom to help your kids or grandkids if they need it. The freedom to live life on your own terms instead of being controlled by bills and debt and financial stress. That freedom is what you're working toward. And it's worth every sacrifice you make now. It's worth driving the old car. It's worth living in the modest house. It's worth cooking at home and skipping the expensive vacations, because every dollar you save and invest now is buying you freedom later. Let me be very clear about something. I'm not saying you can't enjoy life. I'm not saying you should live like a monk and never spend money on anything. But there's a difference between enjoying life responsibly and spending everything you make on temporary pleasures. You can take vacations. Just take affordable ones you pay cash for. You can go out to eat, just not every night. You can buy nice things, just not expensive things that drain your savings. The goal after 40 is balance. You need to enjoy the present while building for the future. But most people get that balance completely wrong. They enjoy the present too much and sacrifice the future entirely. And then they reach 65 with nothing and they realize they're going to be working until they die. Don't let that be you. Here's my final thought on this. If you're 40 or older and you're not wealthy yet, you're at a crossroads. You can keep doing what you've been doing and reach 65 broke. Or you can make the changes I've outlined and reach 65 with wealth. The choice is entirely yours. Nobody else can make it for you. But you need to understand something. Making these changes is hard. Staying disciplined for 20 or 30 years is hard. Watching everyone around you spend money while you save it is hard. Being different is hard. But you know what's harder? Being 70 years old and broke. Being 80 years old and still working because you can't afford to retire. That's harder. Way harder. So you have to decide what kind of hard you want. The heart of discipline and delayed gratification now, or the heart of poverty and financial stress later. Because one way or another, life is going to be hard. You just get to choose which kind of hard. I'm telling you this as someone who's been wealthy and someone who's seen thousands of people's financial situations. Getting rich after 40 is absolutely possible, but only if you stop making the mistakes that got you here. Only if you're willing to be different. Only if you develop the discipline to save and invest consistently for decades, no matter what. You've still got time, but you don't have time to waste. Start today. Cut your spending, kill your debt, save aggressively, invest in index funds, and don't stop until you retire. That's the formula. That's the truth. And if you follow it, 20 years from now, you'll be wealthy, not because you got lucky, not because you made some brilliant move, but because you had the discipline to do the boring things that work. The truth about getting rich after 40 is that it's entirely possible if you're willing to do what most people won't. And that starts right now, today, this moment, make the decision, make the commitment, and start building the wealth that will give you freedom in the years you have left. You can do this, but you have to start now.